Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today from all over the world to celebrate together this special event. My name is Vardit Ravitsky, and I am the president of the International Association of Bioethics, the IAB. We are very pleased to announce the 2021 winner of the IAB Award for Bioethics Service in the Face of Challenges, Dr. Amar Jesani. The award recognizes individuals who have championed local, national, or international efforts sustained over a period of time that advance bioethics or put bioethics into action, mobilizing knowledge into impact, and doing so in the face of challenges. Dr. Jesani's record spanning medical ethics, public health ethics, and research ethics is a shining example of the bioethics work that this award is meant to recognize. Dr. Jesani, the members of the IAB board would like to congratulate you, and we will start with Dr. Asim Ahmed, who is with us.
Congratulations, Amar, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
Before we turn to the keynote lecture, followed by a panel discussion, the other IAB members wants to say a word.
Hello, I am Vardit Ravitsky from Canada. Congratulations, Amar.
Congratulations, Amar. I'm Carla Sainz. I'm based in Washington, D.C.
Hello, I'm Yali Song from China. Amar, congratulations.
Hi, Masovai from the Netherlands. Congratulations, Amar.
Hola, Amar. My name is Maria Medina from Mexico. Many congratulations and virtual hugs for you and all of your family and friends.
Hello, I'm Vilhelmur Arnason, Reykjavik, Iceland. Congratulations, Amar.
Hello, Paulina Tindana from Ghana. Congratulations, Amar.
Lisa Eckenweiler from DC. Congratulations. Thank you so much for your work.
Congratulations, Amar. Stanislav Birko from Montreal, Canada.
As you can see, literally from all over the world. So before we turn to the keynote lecture followed by the panel discussion, I would like to say a few words highlighting Dr. Jesani's distinguished career. As an undergraduate student in Gujarat state in India in the 70s, Dr. Jesani became involved in the student movement against corruption and worked with the urban poor and trade unions. After graduations, he made Mumbai his base, where he conducted extensive research in the fields of health policy, service, and public health in nonprofit institutions. He joined Medico Friends Circle, a group of socially conscious health activists in the early 80s, taking up issues of medical malpractice and the role of health professionals in human rights violations. In the 90s, along with other colleagues, he was involved in the fight against corruption in the medical profession and its leadership, and co-founded the Forum for Medical Ethics Society. Their work led to the production of a newsletter, Medical Ethics, that since became the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, a prestigious multidisciplinary academic journal aiming to strengthen the hands of those with ethical values and concern for the underprivileged. The journal continues to flourish for nearly 3 decades, and Dr. Jesani will talk about it today. In 1994, Dr. Jesani co-founded and was the first director of the Center for Inquiry into Health and Allied Themes that promoted research and training in bioethics. He is also recognized as a champion of the rights of women and girls, doing research and training on reproductive health and gender-based violence that culminated in the establishment of the first public hospital-based crisis center for women in Mumbai. His contributions extend to research ethics, again with particular concern for the vulnerable, especially research participation in low-income countries. Dr. Jesani participated in the organization of many national bioethics conferences and our own international conference, the IAB's World Congress of Bioethics in 2018. Thank you so much for hosting us back then in India. He thus made significant contributions in facilitating the development of bioethics as an academic discipline in India. Dr. Jesani has a lengthy record of publication, including several books. He held several faculty appointments and also serves in a wide range of consultant roles. The IAB board could not be more delighted to have Dr. Amar Jesani as the 2021 award recipient. Please join us in offering him our congratulations and in thanking him for his tremendous contribution to bioethics and to underprivileged populations over the years. Today's event includes a keynote lecture by Dr. Jesani, followed by a panel discussion and then a discussion with you, all the participants. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. You can ask throughout the presentations, and I will pick questions and direct them at Dr. Jesani, our keynote, and our panel participants. I will introduce the panelists prior to their introductory remarks. And now, without further ado, Dr. Jesani, we are really eager to hear you speak on the topic, Bioethics is not a luxury, activism for equity and against prejudice. The microphone is yours.
I hope you are able to see the.
Yes, perfectly.
Well, Adit, thank you very much for such generous introduction. But more than that, I must thank International Association of Bioethics for this award. I'm honored. I feel very humbled by what you have talked just now. What I'm going to do in this keynote address is to talk about three things. And I think all three of them will provide you some understanding of how bioethics developed in India, its context, and its challenges, not only just India, but internationally. Our main activity is a journal that Vadit already told you, but it has been a really big struggle to really continue with it for the last 30 years. But in addition to that, the society which brings it out is also equally active in organizing people on the issues related to bioethics. So here is the journal. Anyone who has not seen it so far, perhaps can have a look at it. And it's a 30 years old. This is the 38th year. And that's how this award, the recognition of not just me, but the work that the entire group has done in India is very, very important for us. So that the age of 30, we don't want to start aging. We want to become younger and younger. And this kind of gesture from the international community is very useful for the group as such to continue with what they have been doing. As I said, that I will cover these three major aspects. The first is to look at what inspired and triggered the collective initiative on medical ethics and bioethics in India. I think it is very important because every movement emerges at a national level in a context, and that context must be understood because that defines the contours of the movement. And I hope I will tell you something about what we have learned from various movements in India and why it was useful. These movements also told us that the ethics is not something that is abstract, that is ivory tower, where you keep talking about philosophy without connecting to the ground. So these are the movements which actually made me to understand, because I came from the human rights movement, from the movement of the trade unions, and the human rights. And I learned ethics as a part of the human rights work, or it is another part of the human rights work. That the rights are very, very important for the ethics. And if the rights are not taken into consideration as a foundation of the ethics, then there are possibilities that we start getting aligned with the people who may be exploiting and oppressing others. So this inspiration from various movements is very, very important. That will be my first part. There are 4 movements I'll talk about. How the Bioethics journal has sustained. And there are several reasons why we could survive. I will try to talk about. And lastly, I'll tell you 2 major issues which are confronting not just India, but internationally for the Bioethics movement to respond to in a very organized manner. Well, if a thought current or a movement sustains for 3 decades, then it must be rooted somewhere in the dynamic of the country. Otherwise, it would have fizzled out. And particularly movement like this, which is not supported by either the government or the corporate industry, where the money flows. Here, you are continuously collecting money from the crowd, from the people who love you and support you. And if they are not there, the movement would have fizzled out. That's how it is very, very important to understand the contextual drivers that explain the movement. I think if it was only an academic movement, then we might have fizzled out. But being a movement which is connected to the large number of people and the problems of the people, I think it has kept us alive for a very long time. All doctors, as well as others who steered it for the first 2 decades, had no formal training in bioethics. I never went to any school of bioethics to learn bioethics. I had to learn it by reading, by discussing, by participating in short training courses and interacting with a large number of people. My previous editors of the journal and the leaders of the Forum for Medical Ethics Society, which brings out this journal, most of them did not have any kind of formal training in bioethics. Only recently, in last 10 years, we have quite a few people who have been trained systematically by doing their PhD or master's degree in bioethics, taking leadership in this movement. So you can see that there was a lot of passion involved in order to get into that. We wanted to change something. We wanted to make a difference. And that's how people did not look about what training one had, whether one was having PhD in bioethics or not, was very, very, very less important than one who was committed to bioethics and wanted to write and talk about it. And it was an independent from government and the industry, as I said. The bioethics in India was driven largely directly or indirectly by the influence of social and political movements of 1970s and 80s. I think both those decades were very, very important, but because many of us who took up the cause of bioethics were shaped by them, directly or indirectly. Sometimes you may not, consciously think about it, but several things that you did that really starts counting later on when you analyze those movements. So there are 4 which I will talk about. First was the movement for community health. It is a humanitarian response to primary health care, making accessible to the mass of people. You all must have heard about the Alma-Ata Declaration of 1977. Several years before that, there was a rise of many people. I think they saw it as a calling within the medical profession who left their lucrative practices in the urban area and set up community health projects from late 1960s onward. And several such projects became very, very famous. And they use the paramedical, the community-based workers in order to reach out to the unreached. And so you can see the seed of understanding that to be ethical health system, you have to have universal access to primary health care. If that is not there, then it is very, very difficult to do an ethical medical practice. That came from that decade. Emergence in early 1970s of a medical friend circle with membership of all those people who are working in different corners of the country as health activists, as provider of the primary health care, in order to communicate with each other, in order to understand the challenges they were facing at the grassroots level. And this is a group which, if you come to the meetings, at least in 80s and 90s, I have seen that these are the meetings which are where the hotly debated issues. But at the same time, there was a basic solidarity with each other. That's how they were friends as well as critique of each other. And that was a basic propelling force. It remained a broad network of thought current, while the individuals who are members of this group, they have set up different kind of organizations and the movement. And one of them is a Forum for Medical Ethics Society and the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics. So we do take inspiration from this movement for the community health and universal access. Now it has broadened with People's Health Movement and Jan Swasthya Abhiyan that is having a coalition of hundreds of organizations from all over the country. And it is also connected at the international level as a part of the People's Health Movement. So this was the first one many of us who came from medicine got influenced by. And that has therefore remained a fundamental force for us, both in the public health as well as health system. We didn't have to go and study public health ethics and health system ethics, because it was very much part of our political consciousness when we came to the bioethics. That without that, bioethics will be incomplete. The second area was human rights movement. That came from the mid-1970s, where India was under emergency. Democratic rights were suspended and the civil liberty movement fought for it. And thereafter, the increasing violence against Dalits and minorities, particularly Muslims and Christians, by the state and civil society actors in 1980s and 90s. You know, both these decades are the rise of fascist religious forces in India. And that also will explain why many people thought that looking at issues of morality and ethics were very, very important. And those who looked at them from the human rights perspective, they have really provided become a core group of the bioethics movement in India. In last over 2 decades, it has extended to the social and economic rights like education, food, information, and indeed healthcare and other issues. So that way, the human rights movement has not remained just civil liberties movement, but got extended. And a lot of work has been done now about, or there's a lot of concern about the involvement of medical professionals in the human rights violation. That's how the behavior of the private sector is also oftentimes looked at in terms of the violation of the human rights, and therefore medical ethics and the bioethics. Issues such as torture and custodial death and the role of medical professions and others has been coming up on a big way in India. So this was another movement really that shaped us. And if you read the IJME, you will find that many of these issues are continuously discussed in the journal. The third one, which shaped us quite a lot, was women's movement, or the movement for gender sensitization and fight for the respect for different genders in the society. From the late 1970s onwards, the women's movement has made a massive impact in bringing women's and broader gender concerns in academics and activism. In most of the universities, you will find the women's studies centers are now very, very active. And they have done a huge amount of work on feminism and the gender in India. Perhaps it was the first social movement. It showed that the healthcare professions and systems were aiding patriarchal exploitation and oppression of women. I think many of us were very, very strongly influenced by that. Making women to carry burden of population control. And people will say, well, India has a high population, but then who ultimately made responsible for women? Neglect and possible potential misuse of the provider control contraceptives, and the exposing the major ethics violation in the contraceptive research, therefore, really provided us impetus in looking at ethics and bioethics more. It also highlighted the neglect of sexual and reproductive health and the rights. Also brought to the fore the healthcare dimension of gender violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and dowry. What it was when she was introducing me, she said that we have been involved in setting up women's center, AIDS center in public health. This marrying of the public health and the gender violence was part of our understanding of the women's movement. Movement for accountability of healthcare professions and the services. This is the fourth one, which is struggle of junior doctors. Some of our second generation doctors who joined us, they all came from this movement. They were fighting against the private medical colleges and for the better quality of medical care in public institutions. Junior doctors earlier had worked more for their own interests, asking for better stipend, asking for better working conditions. But for the first time in mid-1980s, they launched massive struggle against the private medical colleges and the lack of good medical care for the poor people in the public institutions. A group emerged to provide resistance against the refusal of medical profession and main association to be accountable for the corruption and the malpractices following the enactment of the Consumer Protection Act. The campaign against healthcare corruption and misgovernance was a direct trigger for the formation of group in 1980s under the name of Forum for Medical Ethics Society that grew into the distinct Bioethics group in India. So Forum for Medical Ethics Society actually was launched as a way of democratically contesting elections of Maharashtra Medical Council, where Bombay is located. That is how we thought that the misgovernance and corruption must be fought. In 2000, the International Clinical Trials with some rights-based ethics ingrained in the ICMR guidelines. ICMR guidelines are very, very useful. And some of the people who were from ICMR who were very active in research ethics were very much part of our collaboration. The public outcry for accountability of the industry and researchers made more people to recognize the bioethics. These are the four movements I will talk about. These are the ones which have shaped the bioethics core group in India. And I hope that they will keep taking inspirations from them. Now let me come to what came out of this trigger and inspiration that we had, and how this journal has and the society, that is Forum for Medical Ethics Society, has survived despite all the odds that we face. Not many had expected what started in 1989 to survive for such a long time, that it would also result in the sustained publication of a peer-reviewed index journal. I have done some reflection, and I find that there are 7 major factors that contributed in making this movement to survive. The first is the increasing importance of accountability. We talked about accountability, but at the same time, there was a larger movement for right to information, right to food, making politicians and professionals accountable. I think all those movements really created a consciousness that also provided a strong popular support to the idea of making healthcare and healthcare professions accountable. In the late 1980s, IJME, FME provided a voice to the demands for the health professional system accountability when the profession was arrogant and belligerent in refusing to be accountable. Today, I don't think that the same kind of thing will be talked about the medical profession's leadership. But in 1980s, I've seen them in the panel discussions on the TV saying that who the hell people or the government is to come and ask for our accountability. So that thing has completely changed. There is at least an acceptance that there is an accountability. There should be more transparency and accountability. With neoliberalism triumphing in the early 1990s, there was the institutionalization of corruption in the private care. If you read the initial issues of the IGM, you will find that there are many doctors who have written about the kind of corruption that exists. It's not just corruption in the public system. It is also corruption in the private system, where there is what we call cut system or the commission system, where one doctor gives the commission to another, or the one hospital gives the commission to the laboratories, and laboratories give commission to the prescribing doctors. Same thing is about the industry, the pharmaceutical industry. All of them, which were raised by the medical friend circle a decade before us, were very, very important in order for this movement to get growing. Suddenly, the concerns for the ethics became visible and talked about in every controversy and scandal in relation to medical practice, hospitals, and healthcare, and in research. Many times I'm asked that after 30 years, have you brought down the corruption? Have you made medical profession really more accountable? I don't know. My answer is that no, I don't have any kind of data to show that we have actually reduced them. Perhaps it might have increased. And that, I think, happens when there is a movement on this subject. Same thing happens in human rights. The human rights which are not very visible, when the human rights movement appears, they start becoming visible simply because the movement brings out so many cases of violation. I think that is what in 30 years we have done. We have made visible the issue of accountability, the issue of ethics. The second reason why we survived was our openness. We are not sectarian. We try to incorporate different movements and progressive professionals in our fold. We invite them. We would like them to contributing. We would not have undue censorship of the views of different people. We wanted to create a genuine platform where people can come together and debate. But they must do that in order to improve something. It's not to provide platform to the vested interests and the industry there, but to provide some kind of a platform for people who are working for the needy people in the country. While providing platform to different activists and academic viewpoints, it succeeded in projecting itself as a campaigner for positive changes in the healthcare. I think that is what our contribution is there. Along with other organizations which are involved, we have also contributed there. The third was connectedness. I think the Bioethics conferences we started organizing from 2005, every 2 years, was a big plus point and a big push to make journal and the Forum for Medical Ethics to get connected to multi-institutional collaboration and different NGOs and associations of healthcare workers, public health schools, and all kinds of people. I think in the National Bioethics Conference of Indian Journal of Medical Ethics is attended by wide variety of people. Sometimes when we try to count the number of institutions or the organizations represented, we come to some staggering number like 150 or 160, and we feel really very, very pleased by the fact that many organizations and institutions are taking this kind of work seriously, and we are getting in connection with that. Scholar and activists from all those organizations not only help in improving the quality of the IGME, but also kept us in the midst of many, many actions. But they do take up campaigns, and those campaigns get reflected in the IGME, as well as they also invite us to be part of it. So it's a very, very important for a journal which wants to create a movement or is a part of the movement to have this kind of connectedness, and this conferences have provided us that means. The fourth is voluntariness. Large amount of our work is done to volunteer. Most of us work pro bono without charging anything, and that makes us to be taken seriously. We are not here to make money. The journal is not run is a commercial enterprise. We don't, it's an open access. We also don't charge from the authors. And so people take us seriously, that we struggle, but we never compromise. I think that is a very, very important area. And this voluntariness is not just self-exploitation or exploitation of our colleagues, but it is to make a commitment, to show a commitment. I think profession ultimately has to profess, and that is the commitment that is a part of this enterprise. The fifth is participatory and collective effort. The journal is not brought out by one person, by an editor or a few people. There are more than a dozen people who are regularly, on everyday basis, involved. They are working editors. And we have a strong support from our editorial board. I think this participatory function mode has really strengthened us. And somebody or other really, raises hand when we are in crisis and bails us out. The financial autonomy is another one. We are not dependent upon any organization. We face severe financial problems, but so far we have been rescued by somebody or other whenever we thought that we may have to, wind up now, or we have to stop publishing print issue or something like that, and then people come forward and they have bailed us out. Despite receiving some very attractive proposals for commercialization from the corporate publishers, the IJME and its publisher FMES chose the difficult path to remain independent. Open access, payment by the readers and the authors only voluntary. So pay you what you want is the way we run it, and try to create some revenue from our readers and authors, but the rest coming from crowdfunding, from the support from the foundations and the individuals. And the last but very important is independence. Complete editorial independence. The compulsions for survival and pressure of collaborations often make a journal to compromise in editorial freedom. However, we have succeeded in avoiding that situation. Our financial autonomy and strong academic and activist connect have helped us in ensuring that we do not compromise. So we are able to publish articles which are critical of the people and the institution in India, which are very powerful. And I think the job of the journal, job of the media is to show the truth to the power. And I think we should be able to do it in a very polite way, in an academic language, but in a very firm manner. I think that is what IJME has tried to do, and that it is able to do because of the independence that it has nurtured over the years. This is the last section, 2 slides, and then we can have a discussion. Now, where are we, and where the world is about? This is a time when the war has already started. The real meeting on 31st of January was hacked. But in months' time, as you know, the world has changed. There is a war going on. And not only war going on, but a lot of media now is getting criticized for being very racist and partial, right? So this is the issue, which is confronting all of us. And more the inequities happen, the states and the powerful people are going to, be more violent in suppressing the people's aspiration. In last 2 decades, several publications have outlined the challenges in new millennium. Those challenges are often related to the complexities in the healthcare use of new technology, advances in the scientific research. I have participated in quite a few and done some discussions in the comments and that kind of stuff. But most of them are about that. It may be neuroethics, it may be nanoethics, whatever that you can talk about. But there are more complexities talked about are related to technology and the healthcare issues and the scientific research. However, none of them is as pressing as social issues, which with having human rights dimension, if not tackled urgently, can change the value system of the world with devastating consequences. And that will have direct impact on the healthcare and the way technology is used in a partial manner. There are many of them, but I'll talk only about two. They are very simple issues, and I know all of you know about them. The rise of extreme social and economic inequity. Neoliberalism has not just shifted focus away from the welfare of the people of the world, but also diverted resources from the people to the corporate world. Remember, neoliberalism does not mean the state is less active, although it claims that it is less active than the past. But it is very, very active or hyperactive. But it is active primarily for the rich and not for the poor and exploited. It is very active for the capital, not for the labor, for those who are really working hard. The inequities are the highest ever in the modern history. In the pandemic, while people have suffered and made sacrifices, almost more than 3/4 of the people in India have lost a part of their income, and large number of them have been pushed below the poverty line. So that is what people have suffered. But on the other hand, the upper stratas of the society have gained phenomenal wealth. They have become richer and richer. So this extreme inequalities, which are going to cause more and more friction, because in order to continue to rule with on people who are deprived, there will be more violence, more suppression, and there is a use of sectarian politics. They say populist politics, but the populist politics is a majoritarian politics, where people are divided, and the populism is used for violence against others, and that's how there is a rise of prejudices, discriminations, and stereotypes all over. Even in the Ukraine war, you will find that some of the commentators talk about the importance of it simply because those who are getting hit just now look like them and not like the real migrants that they normally see in the developed countries. There are so many. I mean, if you look at last 20, 30 years, the millions of people have perished in the war. In Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Afghanistan, and different places, in Slovak country, all of them. I think you will see that there have been real violence all over, and along with that, there is a rise of the prejudices on race, migration, caste in India, and elsewhere too, where the Indians are located, and religion. All of them accentuated in the pandemic. A related rise of the fascist majoritarian movements in India, in Brazil, and in many other places, Philippines, I can say, and they are undermining democratic institutions. So these are the two major challenges, and all of them are going to and are affecting the healthcare systems, where there is a more concerns about only the welfare of certain kind of people and not the other. I think that was never looked at. Medicine and the healthcare was considered to be neutral for everybody, and our commitment was irrespective of the people's background, and to work for them and to ensure that we reach out to those who are unreached. I think that is being eroded, and that may have a massive impact in whatever technology you are using, whichever health system that you are functioning. So these are the two major political and moral issues that are confronting us. And I hope the international associations like IAB will be discussing on them from the ethics perspective more and more, so that we can galvanize the human rights and ethics communities all over the world, which are interested in the health system, to do something. These issues are shaping a new morality of the world. And the shift away from the human rights and ethics, as we have known and practiced throughout our life. this is an opportunity for the bioethics to respond to its true international calling. I think these are the issues that I hope the panelists who know more on this subject will respond to them. So here I will end because I have already taken enough time, and we have a very prominent prominent friends, Farhat, Lisa, and Julian, to give more inputs on the subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amar, for your inspiring words, your very insightful points about inequity, structural injustice, human rights, issues that have been present perhaps more than ever over the last couple of years, and in recent days, as you said, are brought to the forefront in yet another way. We have panelists from around the world representing different cultural perspectives and different disciplinary backgrounds. Each one of them will give a 5-minute comments, sort of a reaction to your keynote lecture, after saying a few words about who they are and how they know you. And then we will open up the discussion to questions. So first up, I'm inviting Dr. Farhat Mawazam, a professor and founding chairperson of the Center of Biomedical Ethics and Culture in Karachi, Pakistan. Farhat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vardit. So very briefly about me, I'm a surgeon. I grew up in Pakistan, trained in the United States, returned after 2 decades to Pakistan, initially as chair of the Department of Surgery at the Aga Khan University, realized that I was doing the same science, but I was doing it in a very different world, got interested in bioethics, and went back again to UVA to learn more about it. Currently, as Vardit has said, I head the Center of Biomedical Ethics and Culture in Karachi, and where we essentially offer education and research. Where Amar is concerned, Amar is a long-time friend and colleague. We have known him since CBEC, the center began, which was about 15 years ago. He has been a regular teacher for us. He comes across and we go across to his programs, and we've been collaborating on different things. Amar has been invaluable to us as a teacher. And the reason for that is that he brings in a perspective of human rights. Most of our students are primarily healthcare related professionals. And India and Pakistan shares a lot of problems as well as values. So he, as he has done today, he looks at bioethics through a different eye, the eye of a human rights activist. So Amar, that was a delightful talk as always, and very provocative. Enjoyed listening to it. So just a couple of points, the take-home messages that I get after listening to you. I think Amar has presented a challenge to all of us who are in bioethics, and in a way stimulating us to search for some correctives in the way bioethics is done, as is said around the world. And I think one of a common thread that runs through what he has said that I got out of it was the increasing emphasis within contemporary bioethics on one's right to do something, the individual right, rather than on what is the right thing to do, particularly in social issues, where issues of social justice and solidarity and responsibilities to others, this seemed to have been eclipsed in the way we are proceeding with contemporary bioethics. The second point, and which he made, which is important also, is when he calls it that bioethics is not a luxury. But I understand that it is not something that's just done within classroom discussions, etc. And I would agree with him that more and more I realize bioethics is a contact sport. it should be, at least doing bioethics should be a contact sport, which is driven by existing contexts that exist within a society or a particular country. And what is striking in Amar's experience is that the players are not academicians, they're not philosophers, they're not people like me who are clinicians and who have gotten a degree from the United States. So the players, I think the message is, must be local people who know the terrain, who know the local context. And this is what he has demonstrated. And this makes it, and this is a message for all those who are listening to us today, people from our part of the world, developing countries, that bioethics needs to be homegrown. And it is important that unless it is a homegrown phenomena, and I think Amar points to that, you cannot sustain it, because then it becomes just an academic thing for which people join in order to get a master's or to get awards, etc. The third point that I think is important is that, which comes out from Amar's talk, bioethics does not have one recipe. It is not something that can be captured within 4 principles or abstract kind of universalities, because as he says again and again, it's context that matters. And this is, I've worked with IAB for a long time in the past. I've also been on the board. This was something we have been struggling with, that how do you make not just bioethics international, but how do you internationalize it? And in order to do that, more voices are needed from our part of the world, just as Amar has shown, because we need to learn about the different evolutions and trajectories that bioethics is taking around the world. And I think we can learn from that. We can learn from each other. And I think that's an important thing all of us should be doing. So my last point, and when Amar talks about the future challenges, I think he's talking about the challenges for both IAB and also for all of us who are interested in bioethics. So when I look over the years, the focus in contemporary bioethics has been increasingly on esoteric, very seductive kind of things. So we talk about genetics, we talk about research in genetics, we talk about reproduction and other technologies, we talk about precision medicine, and most recently, of course, we've been talking about the pig to human heart transplant. So that is making all the news. Everybody's talking about that. Now, what is happening is, and this is my criticism of myself and of those who are in bioethics, what we are doing is we are increasingly pushing aside the social and the contextual issues that really lie at the heart of social and health inequities for our populations. That's something that has been missed. And COVID, Amar gave an example of that as a prime example. Who can say we don't need vaccines? Of course we need vaccines. But what is becoming very clear is that there is a lot more. The social issues have been pushed aside, and those are the issues that are really significant. So I will just end with one question to Amar. Maybe you can tell me something about it. What do you think? So can academic bioethics, and those who are activists, do you see these as 2 different groups of people? Do you think they can merge? Or do you think these are 2 parallel streams that will continue to run? Perhaps something, whenever we have time. I would like your opinion on that, because I question myself. I'm not an activist. So what does one do, Amar? Okay, thank you very much. Loved your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhat. Moving swiftly on to Dr. Lisa Schwartz, Arnold Johnson Chair in Healthcare Ethics at McMaster University in Canada.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say thank you to the IAB for inviting me to participate in this panel, and specifically to Vardit and colleagues who have made the effort to renew it so that we've had this chance to celebrate Dr. Jesani's career publicly in this way. And also to Amar, this is exactly the award for you, that your career has been such an inspiration to many, and those of us who know you and who have the opportunity to get to know you and to hear the stories that you tell. As I said, it's an inspiration and quite an honor to be here. So congratulations. I think I'm supposed to begin by saying how I know Amar, and we met probably in 2014, I think it was, when I joined the ethics review board for Médecins Sans Frontières, for MSF. And Amar was a long-standing member, I think probably one of the original members of that board, and has always, I think, kept a tone in our discussions when we have the opportunities to meet and in the chances to review the same protocols together. The question always emerges from Amar, who stands to benefit? And I think the focus on who stands to benefit, who stands to be harmed, with a wide breadth of vision of who those people may be, is the conscience and the conscientiousness and that sense of accountability to who do we owe that direction and to who do we owe an ethical commitment. So it's been tremendous to be able to work with him and to think about how your work informs the trajectory. And it made me think when initially, when I was invited to participate in the panel, that growing up in Canada and having trained in both Europe and in Canada, bioethics was focused very much on the bedside, and decisions that doctors and healthcare providers generally make at the bedside. And our instruction usually has been to be neutral. To not be making the decisions, but to help guide people through their thinking about their decisions. And the first thing we would usually do is talk about, and we've already heard this notion of the four principles. So we talk about the four principles, it's sometimes called the Georgetown Mantra, all of which are very important and which emerged, I think, from their own historical need for a kind of activism where patients were taken seriously and given the place at the core, but then became less and less activist as it was absorbed into the professions and accepted as a sense or general set of norms. So that our work was simply to say, how does this case reflect the respect for the four principles, respect for patient autonomy? What are your values? What are you trying to place at the center of this decision making? And I think that kind of values elucidation and then sort of practical practice of values application in that neutral way has its place. It's an important way of approaching things, particularly because it gives some respect. On the other hand, it doesn't seem to be sufficient. And there's that frustration sometimes of recognizing that something is deeply wrong. And it's deeply wrong because of the context, as we keep talking about, keep coming back to that context, that the context hasn't begun to recognize that sometimes, an attempt to respect autonomy ignores the sense that individuals don't really, or don't have the set of choices that they might be able to choose from if they were a different kind of person with different social context in a different space. And that the work for bioethicists, yes, entails a certain amount of that neutral approach, but sometimes has to take a stand and sometimes has to say, whose benefits are we really looking at here? Who's going to be harmed in this circumstance? And how do we make sure that we're revealing those who are the stakeholders, you know, those who really have something at stake at the core of the work that we're doing? So I think where I have been, you know, inspired by, and I think led and learned from Amar's work has been very much in the realm of asking the questions that go beyond, you know, simply, you know, what can be done in this circumstance, and opens up the background of what needed to be done, and how are we working in these kind of imperfect moral contexts that are creating harms despite our best intentions. And you know, as working with a colleague recently, we started to talk about, and then how are those harms working through me, even though I intend to avoid them. So even though I want to recognize the social inequities, and even though I want to recognize institutionalized racisms, there seems to be you know, a difficulty in sidestepping them if I remain within a kind of a paradigm of bioethics as it's always been practiced, which is very, you know, I wanted to say Eurocentric, but I think it's really Anglo-centric, in a sense, very North American centric. And I think, as we were talking about just now, opening up and broadening to other perspectives is what's necessary. So I have a few questions really for Dr. Jesani and for the, you know, for the rest of this discussion. And one of them, I guess, I've wondered about is, you know, bioethics went from focusing on bedside care to being widened, I think broadened through research ethics. But now, as we start to focus on policy, and considering your own background in sort of social policy and activism in public health, and as you said, the trade unions, do you think that bioethics that is informed by a sort of policy and public health orientation is more receptive to an activist orientation? And that could, you know, then go back to informing what's going on at the bedsides. And so should we be, as bioethicists, training not just in the philosophy of ethicists, of mainly European ethicists, but also start to be thinking as political theorists or political scientists do, as social scientists and anthropologists do, and widening, I guess, the foundation for the way that we're thinking about things, and particularly also as trade unionists do, because I think that the willingness to become activist seems to have more of a grounding in social activism. I also wonder, you know, at one point I was thinking, could we imagine a bioethics that was founded on human rights? Like, what if we had started at human rights instead of the other way around? And initially I thought we should imagine that exercise. And then I realized, well, that sounds to me, at least from our discussions about it, Amar, that's what India has done, that it started with human rights concerns, and how those human rights concerns should be brought to healthcare generally, and then to healthcare individually on, you know, patient to practitioner relationships. And what would that do if we imported it? Because I think it needs to be done more broadly in North American, European contexts. And then I think finally is the question of how do we become activists in our work, and to develop the courage that takes, because sometimes it's hard to do it, and we don't always necessarily make friends when we are. So how do we develop the courage to take the activist's perspective and do this work more formally in part of our work as bioethics? So I think I'll stop there. Yeah, okay.
Thank
good.
you,
And
Lisa.
okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Powerful questions. Julian, I'm gonna ask you to keep your comments short because we have fascinating questions from the audience that I'd like to have time to address. Dr. Julian Sheeler from the UK, Specialist Advisor on Ethics and Human Rights, very appropriate, from the Policy Directorate of the British Medical Association, as I said, from the UK. Julian, please.
Thank you. I will keep them brief because, if for no other reason, that my fellow panelists have already said many of the things that I would want to say. So very briefly, when I first came into working with the British Medical Association, I was very wet behind the ears. And at that stage, this was 25 years ago, Amar was already a legend. So I'm simply going to say from the get-go, Amar has been, for me, an incredibly important and influential figure in human rights in a healthcare context. I can't really exaggerate the importance of Amar's influence at the British Medical Association as we were trying to broaden our interest away from just a kind of slightly myopic focus on problems in England and the UK. And here was somebody who was teaching us about questions of fairness and justice and human rights in a global context. So massively influential for the British Medical Association. And my former colleagues, Amar, Anne Somerville and John Chisholm, both have enormous respect for you. So that's very quickly on the background. One thing I want to emphasize, Lisa has already touched upon it, Fahad has already touched upon it. Interestingly, I think bioethics in the UK also came out of a certain kind of social movement. What happened in the UK, and we were in a position to be able to draw down some material from North America, but there was a change in the UK post-war, post-1960s, saying, hold on a second, these archaic structures of medical paternalism mean that patients are disappearing from this narrative. And really, so for me, bioethics in the UK is also critically an expression of a certain kind of social movement saying, hold on a second, the way in which power is distributed in this relationship is fundamentally unfair. And I think it's fair to say that that has been a driving force of bioethics, medical ethics particularly, in the UK. And the second point I want to make, again, a slight repetition here, but COVID, and now, you know, I think I am the one European on the panel here. COVID and now war again in Europe. You know, we are seeing there's a 40-mile column of tanks approaching Kiev. And we are already seeing health facilities targeted. We are already beginning to see, I don't know if they're targeted deliberately or accidentally yet, but we're already seeing them destroyed. And so we come again to this moment. We're moving away from this concept that bioethics has a focus on these intimate clinical relationships, an almost exclusive focus on these intimate clinical relationships. And we're really beginning to see far broader questions of social justice, global justice and fairness beginning to make themselves strongly and properly felt within bioethics. And that's, you know, although COVID and now this terrible war are brutally painful events, they also can open us up to very different moral perspectives. And I think that is where bioethics is going. One thing that Amar didn't mention in his climate change as well. I think bioethics, if we're interested in the biological sciences more broadly, if we're interested in our ecosystems and justice and fairness, that's another area I think where we're going to see very, very important developments in bioethics. One question, if I may, that I would throw in, and then I'll fall quiet about it. What would it look like, Amar? One of the questions that's really urgent, for example, in MSF at the moment, what would it look like to decolonize bioethics? What would that mean? Where would that take us? Where would that take our thinking? Where would that take our institutions? Where would that take our practice? Seems to me a massively urgent contemporary issue. And I'll fall quiet now.
We do not want you to be quiet. We just want you now to answer questions from our audience. I grouped the wonderful questions from the Q&A into themes. One of them is, Amar, the younger generation wants your advice. We'll get to that in a minute. But I'd like to start with topics that emerge from the Q&A that speak directly to what we just discussed. So I want to read, first of all, everybody congratulates you, obviously. I want to start with a question from Dr. Nancy Jecker, who is a member of the IAB board. And she's asking, what is the best way to engage in global bioethics while at the same time fulfilling the vision you portray of doing bioethics in a way that is locally and contextually embedded? What a wonderful question. She's continuing by asking, does global bioethics arise only inductively from diverse local perspectives, or is there also a role for articulation of diverse theoretical perspectives that provide tools and narratives that communities can embrace? This marries beautifully the question from Jeff D'Souza, who says, what do you see as the role for bioethicists in the global north to help promote bioethical principles and human rights in India and across the world? Do you have any thoughts on any concrete ways we can come together to learn from one another to help ensure equal access to healthcare and the protection of research participants? And I would broaden this to human rights in general. And a third question that really attaches to this cluster, this theme, is, how can we take the discussion on ethics out of academic meetings, such as this one, to active policymaking, especially in international policymaking, as we're witnessing in armed conflicts in different parts of the world today, and obviously in the context of a pandemic? So I know these are different, and this one is from Murad Khan. I know that these are different questions, but I think overall they're touching on the same theme of making bioethics, how bioethics can impact the real world, policy and current issues, and how we can make it truly global, but while still keeping it contextualized and local and in the appropriate way. So Amar, you first, and then any of the panelists, just let me know who has comments on this theme.
Well, thank you. I think these questions are quite challenging. I'm not so good in philosophy and theories, but what I can say is that I do engage with various theories coming from the developed world. What I actually expect is to increase the diversity of the theoretical representation at the international level in bioethics. There needs to be more interaction and more accommodation of the ideas. One thing that I have noticed often in any kind of discussion on morality is that we create an idea and fix at it, and then it never changes. Okay, you can do some simple refinement, but there is no radical change made. I think these tools of analyzing various situations needs to be refined continuously, and that can happen only in a very diverse social setting where we are interacting. I think one area which everybody knows is that while interacting with the developing world, there has to be a strong commitment to the respect, to ensure that there is more space provided to the people who are being studied in research. I think that is another question that is there, that about how do we do the international research in that case. And I think if we create this space for interaction with each other, then it should be possible. There has to be some common commitment. And I find that oftentimes in the developed world, where the people have come to take it as normal to have universal access, they do not understand the condition in the developing country where people don't have universal access to education, healthcare, and social security. Now, how in such situation, like say doing clinical trial, can itself become a kind of an exploitative process, needs to be looked at more carefully. I think it is a topic of massive international debate, and I find the debate very, very useful, and I hope it will be taken up again and again. And the last point that is about influencing policy making. Well, I have worked with the policymakers last, how many, 40 years now. I started interacting with the policymakers since late 1980s. My experience says that policy making is a political process. That we can talk about evidence-based policy making, but what actually happens is politics-based policy making. They choose the evidence that fits into the politics that they have. So unless we create a very strong support base within the people, a massive public support and media outcry on the issue, the policymakers are not going to listen to it. They will definitely tick a box saying that Indian Journal of Medical Ethics or the ethics people were consulted, and your name will appear there, but what comes out will be totally different. So keep that in mind, that not just for the sake of having better understanding of the ground reality in the local area, but even to be effective in changing policy, we have to have a strong connection with the ground. So just by having a few academic articles will change the policy, may happen rarely, but that is not the regular way of policy making in most of the times that I have seen in a country like India. Yeah, Julian wants to be there, so let Julian have floor.
I just wanted to share an observation, really, which was that a couple of years ago, I was invited to sit on a working group looking at research in global health emergencies. This was pre-COVID, extraordinarily prescient in its way, or accidentally prescient anyway. And I had assumed naively, and this is how one goes on, one hopes learning as one gets older. I'd naively assumed that the areas of moral concern would be this tension between thoroughness of research oversight and the requirement for rapidity. And it was but weeks into a 2-year process when we realized that actually, well, I realized, other people already knew this, that actually the fundamental issue here was justice and fairness. That the things that I had been considering about, okay, yes, so how do you ensure rigor of oversight, what, you know, under the pressure of these sort of terrible circumstances? Actually, people were saying you've got to go far deeper than that. You've got to look into the context in which research is being taken place. You've got to look at where the values of research flow. Global research is saturated with perverse value flows away from resource-poor settings into resource-rich settings. So for me, I just wanted to share that really, because that was an ongoing process of understanding that from one perspective, a kind of clinical ethics perspective in the UK, you look at a problem and then your context is shifted and it becomes quite obvious that it's a very, very different problem. And that continued ignorance on the behalf of people like me is pretty inexcusable, to be honest. So that was an important moment for me.
Thank you, Farhad. Still muted.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think this, the points that Julian made, and in reference to some stuff that earlier Amar had said, the issue of research. I'm in a center in Karachi. It's the only center currently in ethics in Pakistan. The most common request that we get from universities and other places in Pakistan is, can you come and please do a research workshop for us so that we can set up an ERC? And that's what it is. It has become, as Julian is pointing out, the issues of fairness, etc. I think certainly in Pakistan, in our part of the world, research has become a very mechanical kind of a thing where you have a piece of paper, an informed consent tick, you know, who did you talk to? Did you get a signature, etc.? And I think this is one of the things that is certainly a big issue, particularly in countries where the participants or the subjects have really very little clue about what you're doing. So I think this is just to agree that this is an area, I think, that has become a major problem. You can't get funding, for example, to do a clinical ethics workshop, but you will get a lot of funding if you want to set up research ethics ERCs, because that's good for international research.
Thank you, Farhad. Lisa, please.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to take that back and follow on from what Farhad has just said, and back to what Julian's question was around decolonization. I think that the presence too of a sense of a systematic review of a system of values and principles and things that inform the way those reviews are done, as opposed to thinking again about the context and drawing from the context. We risk a kind of confirmation bias in the work that we do, because every time we sit down to address questions or train people in questions related to ethics and research review, we are reconfirming the same principles and the same values over and over again. And at some point, I think we have to break that cycle and reimagine, as we were talking about before, to reimagine a bioethics that isn't necessarily steeped in all the traditions. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been anything of value up until now. I really do think there is. And once was at a meeting where a dean from a medical school in Africa, I ventured to ask, should we really be just reproducing research ethics in other countries the way we've done it in the global north? And he said, look, if it's ethical here, it's ethical there. So there is something of value, something worth preserving. But the question is, why do we center it? Why is it always the dominant discourse? And is there a different way? And how do we, I think, break out of that? And I really do believe that something around introducing human rights in the way that it's been practiced in bioethics has been practiced in India is a way to break that cycle.
Thank you so much. I'd like to have time to address the second theme, which is linked. Dr. Prasanna is asking this: since you're dealing with the core issue of corruption in the medical field, did you face any kind of opposition from medical professionals or any other organizations for bringing the truth? Because the truth may reduce the funding of people who are involved in corruption. A related question from Dr. Gopal Dabada: what is the role of medical bioethics when globally corporate power is increasing? And our own board member, Talia Arawi from Lebanon, it's a bit of a question and a bit of a frustration. She says, what do you do when you realize fairness and justice are being shattered, and the only thing that you can do is bear witness? That those in charge pay lip service to what is right, but people's rights are abused, they die from hunger, and you end up with moral injuries and scars. So I think these three questions from different parts of the world speak to the same issue, and I would love to hear, Amar, what you have to say.
Yeah, these are very important practical issues. Let me start with saying something about research and then connect with what Prasanna has asked. In 2005, India liberalized clinical trials and allowed the international clinical trials to take place simultaneously in India. Between 2005 to 2010, more than 1,000 clinical trials were going on per year. Massive expansion. And there were continuous news of violation of ethics during the clinical trial. What Farhad was mentioning, that they ask you to set up this ethics review committee. Now, imagine in India at that time, there were more than 1,000 ethics review committees present. But none of those ethics committees came together the fight against this violation of ethics. Somehow or other, they were just being part of the problem rather than part of the solution. However, from 2010 onward, there was a massive struggle in India by many people. I think IJME was involved, Forum for Medical Ethics was involved, but also many other people's rights group NGOs and the movements that took up the issue. They went to Supreme Court, they fought. So I think it is very important to see that these changes are brought about by having alliance with the various groups of people who are getting affected by the unethical work of the way of the other. I think if that is not done, sitting in ethics committees are no way. I have sat on so many ethics committees, but I never allowed my connection to the people's right or the patient's rights or the participants' rights group outside to be affected by being part of it. I have to remain independent and connected to the larger interests of the people. If you do that, then things work. I think same thing is being in the clinical practice. I was reading a big debate about activism and being in the clinical ethics committee in Hastings Center report. I think it is very important that if you are there in the clinical ethics committee and you find that there is a discrimination, there is prejudice, there is a the stereotyping of the people who are inside the hospital, your colleagues, that is one point. Your patients being discriminated is another point. But if you don't, if you are there in US and don't get connected to say Black Lives Matter movement in order to do that, to change that, then sitting on the clinical ethics committee, you are not going to be affecting big change there. So bring about policy changes at the meso level, that is institutional level, and the macro level, that is the policy, government policy level, requires the participation of the larger masses. That is very, very important. So yes, when you raise those issues, yes, profession, which is very commercialized and want to make more money, and in the process is violating ethics, is not going to be pleased. When we started, we faced huge opposition, and we are still facing huge opposition from them. They would not like us. They are, even my own colleagues, some of my classmates will call me enemy of the doctors, although I'm a doctor. So you have to live with that, and you have to assert, saying that yes, to be ethics is being sensitive to the other side, to be part and supportive of the other side, and that is patient, the participant, the people in general. I think that needs to be carried out, and the fight against global corporate power can never be done by one individual or one discipline. It has to be a collective fight. So what Gopal is saying is true, that the power is very strong. But then unless we create people's power, where we all come together and keep debating and discussing and having solidarity, unless we do that, there is no way of countering that power. I think that is what the message that I can give. Yeah, Juliet, yes.
Fascinating stuff, Amar. Thank you. Two very quick points. From a UK perspective, where we have, as I'm sure many of you know, a National Health Service. From one of the big anxieties for me looking at medical practice in the UK is the movement towards increased private engagement, because I think it has the potential to send professional moral compasses spinning. One of the things about the UK is that by and large, most professionals working in the NHS are under no real conflicts of interest. There is no personal financial interest in them making whichever clinical decision they make. And from my perspective, long may it last. The second thing I think is one of the most important issues in human rights for the future is the way in which we work out human rights in relation to business and commerce. I think unless commercial organizations are now so powerful, they are socially transformative. And when you look at things like Uber, when you look at these platform models of employment, and you look at the way in which resources flow around that and where wealth accumulates. I mean, Amar really interestingly in his speech talked about neoliberalism. You know, we're still, yes, there's pushback, yes, there's you know the response, but we still live largely in a sort of neoliberal kind of context. And I think trying to understand how rights work and can have purchase and traction in a context where states are less powerful, I think that's a huge challenge for us for the future.
Thank you, Julian. There's so much more to be said, but we have 5 minutes left, and I don't want to leave the younger generation without an answer. So here are 3 questions relating to requesting advice. Roshani Babu is simply asking any words of advice for budding ethicists in present times. Supriya Subramani is asking, could you please share your thoughts on how young bioethics scholars should negotiate or bridge academia and activism, especially in the Global South? And Anurag Bhargava is asking, do you see trained bioethicists acting in the same manner, emphasis on trained bioethicists acting in the same manner as the organically evolved ethicists like yourself? I loved that framing. So these 3 questions I think are about the emerging generation of scholars who are interested in doing activism and not just scholarship, especially in the Global South, and what words of wisdom you, the slightly more senior scholars, have for the younger generation.
Very good question. I think Farhat has also raised a question about the dichotomy between academic and activism. So they are all connected questions for younger people as well as for anybody who is in the academic. Well, I remember in 1970s and 80s, there being a lot of debate, particularly 70s and early 80s in India, in social sciences or humanities. A lot of discussions about difference between activists and the academic. My wife comes from social sciences. She's an economist. So we have been interacting and learning about that. And there was some kind of reservations among the academics about the activists, because she was also an activist, the women's activist. However, when the women's movement made a massive impact on the academia and the women's study centers that established, they came out their own theories, and they remained continuously in contact with the women's movement outside. And that provided a bridge between the academia and the activism. So those who were theorizing inside the academia, they were also participating in the women's movement outside. So if we talk about ethics and equality, if we talk about human rights and gender and being anti-racist or anti-caste, how can we, not be connected to those people who are suffering because of those issues outside? I think that's the key for the young people as well as all people who are in the academy. They have to find time. They have to interact with them. If there are activists who know the ground reality, unless you interact with them and be part of their learning, you will never be able to bring that to the academic understanding. I think we have to bridge that gap. And social sciences and humanities, to a certain extent, particularly social sciences, that gap is being bridged. But in professional universities like medicine and healthcare universities, that is not there. I think even in engineering in India, IITs have a strong humanities and social science departments and divisions, which bring some amount of interaction with those technologies, with the social issues. I think that thing is missing in medicine in India. And that is one of the reasons why the doctors become very, very insular to the social issues. And that has been continued. I think if we are able to break that in medicine, we'll do a great service to the medical ethics in India. So that is, I think that's what I would say. I think Anurag has also raised one more question. that will the trained ethicists be able to do the same thing that the organically evolved ethicists will do? There's no guarantee. You know, some of them may feel more sensitized. It depends upon how do you look at the career. If you find that ethics is a lucrative career for making money, then one can go in a totally different direction. You can probably become the ethics advisor of the pharmaceutical companies, an ethics advisor to the president or something like that, and make money. But that is not the aim of the career that you are building. And you want to engage for a social change, then whether you are sitting in the academic or you may be in the NGO, you may be able to pursue bioethics, which is in the interest of the people. I think that is what is required. I would ask where the heart is, not whether you are trained bioethicists or not. I think that is a different issue. The trained bioethicists can bring that training and inform the activism hopefully much better than what I could have done, provided that person's heart is at the right place. I think that's the only thing I can say. And to Farhad, I can say is that, well, the linking with the movement is not an easy task. It is a conflictual interaction. Movement itself can be very, very aggressive against the academic people. And academic people have to put up with that. Same way, those people have to learn that you are able to contribute something into that movement. I think that relationship, to develop that relationship, is not an easy task. Fortunately for us, like say, I can say that I have been keeping one leg in both. I am in NGOs as well as in the academic. I started in the NGO, but got a recognition in the academic and started teaching public health to begin with, and then bioethics, without having any degree in both of them. But that gave me an opportunity to learn about what the academics were doing as well as what the activists were doing. And hopefully more and more people in academic as well as activism will try to bring their concerns to each other and share the platform so that the movement is strengthened. Yeah, Julian?
Just 2 seconds. There's only a distinction between academia and activism if you think there is. If you think there isn't, it disappears.
Thank you. I wish we could continue such fascinating topics, but unfortunately we're out of time. This has been recorded and will be shared with people who could not attend. I'd like to end with some thank yous. First of all, thank you, Amar, for honoring the IAB by accepting the award. Thank you, of course, Lisa, Julian, and Farhad for being our panelists today and sharing your wisdom. Thank you to the IAB board members and Stas Birko, our coordinator, for the work behind the award. And thank you, Marie-Françoise Malo, for organizing today's event. I'm wishing a good day to those in North America, a good evening to those in Europe, a good night to those in India, and the rest of the world, whatever it is for you. I hope you enjoyed this event. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much, Vardit and the IAB.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Amar.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.